I would like to ask you to open your Bibles to Daniel chapter 2. The teens and I have been working from this text for about a month, and so I'm going to work very quickly this morning, but if you have your Bible, it will help you kind of keep up with some things that we're talking about, because this is detailed information here. And it's just not something you're going to be able to just hear. If you can look at it and have it in front of you, or get home and look at it when you get home. Daniel chapter 2, this is a text that can transform your understanding of almost everything. And it's an absolutely wonderful text. There's a song that we sang, the very first song, and it has a line in it. And I couldn't believe Tom led the song this morning, because I was trying for about 2 years now to figure out what song prophet and priest and king was in. and then Tom led the song this morning, and I was like, it's in that song. How fitting, because that's what we want to talk about this morning. We want to talk about how Jesus is prophet and priest and king, but especially prophet this morning. I would love to do some messages later where I talk about the priest and king part of that, but this morning we're going to be focusing on the prophet part, because I find that many people, they look at the Bible for a lot of reasons, but one of the things that I would like to help people see is that the Bible is full of prophecy. And ultimately, prophecy is very important. We talk about things that are important, we talk about things that are significant, but boy, when we talk about prophecy, we're talking about things that shape the world. Especially when we talk about prophecy that is actually true, which remarkably the Bible is just a repository of unimaginable amounts of prophecy that are actually true. And in this text here in Daniel chapter 2, we see an event in which God is going to use one of the most powerful men on earth to reveal to this individual almost what I would describe as 500, 600, 700 years of history that will come. And if you look even farther past that, it actually goes into our current day today, right up to today. It will talk that far ahead. And one of the things that is important to see, many people would say, well, God, what does he really do? What power does God really have? Does God really shape history? Does God really work through all of the people of the world? Does God really take through what he says he's going to do and actually achieve it? And one of the things we'll see in this text is he has that kind of power and more. He has that kind of power and more. So in the early parts of Daniel chapter 2, which I don't have time to read this morning, I'll tell you this, I'll recap it really quick though. Nebuchadnezzar, he has a dream, and it's a dream that terrifies him. As is so often the case when we're dealing with prophecy and when we're dealing with things that are earth-shaking, they can be very disturbing to us. And in this particular case, this individual is terrified. He's so upset by it that he doesn't sleep, he doesn't know what to do, he doesn't know what to think, because he can't get the vision out of his head. And a lot of times when we look at God and his word and what he has done, it has that effect on us. It did when I was a kid, on me. It just blew my mind. And what we're seeing here is that this vision that he receives, he has no idea what it means, but he knows it is substantial. And so he calls in all of the wise men of Babylon, but he doesn't trust them. Kind of like today's politicians, to tell him the truth. So he tells them this: you tell me the dream and I will let you live. Basically is the deal that he makes with them. One of the interesting characters though in this is Daniel. And Daniel's in that boat. Daniel's in the boat of, you tell me the dream and I will let you live, because I don't trust you to tell me, if I tell you what the dream is, what it's going to be about. This is a huge issue. Huge issue, because here's one of even God's own people that are now in the firing line of this issue. And how is God going to respond to that? Well, we see in verse 19 that God reveals all of this to Daniel. God reveals it all to him. God shows him all of it. And then Daniel is able to go and tell the king, hey, don't worry, I'm coming, and I know what this is about. And I'm going to share with you why I know it and how I know it. And he talks in verse 20 and 21 and 22 about all these wonderful things that God is doing. because God is very much at work in this time in history because his people are in exile. They are slaves, they are lost, and without God's help, they will never return. They will never be a people again, and they will never be anything again. We forget that Daniel in this time is a slave, is a servant, has zero value. He's just a slave. And yet, he is going to tell the most powerful man on earth, Nebuchadnezzar, his dream. This dream that if it's not interpreted, big things are going to become a problem. So he says in verse 31, "You, O king, were looking, behold, there was a single great statue, and that statue was large and of extraordinary splendor, was standing in front of you, and its appearance was awesome." In the ancient world, when they wanted to intimidate you, they would build these statues, and they were huge. As I watch these YouTube videos of ancient Egypt, and I look at these statues of Ramses, colossal. Most of the people of ancient Egypt would have never seen Ramses, but they would have seen his statues. And what opinion of Ramses would they have had of Ramses having seen those statues? They would have thought this guy was unbelievable. They would have thought he was amazing. They would have thought he had astounding power. And here, Nebuchadnezzar sees a statue, and he knows what that means. He knows that means power is being displayed to him. He knows that he is about to be intimidated in the same way that he would intimidate others. And if you look at chapter 3, what does he do in the next chapter? He builds a statue. And he tries to get people to bow down to it. But here in this vision, he sees a great statue, and it is awesome in appearance. And the head of the statue was made of fine gold, its breast and its arms of silver, its belly and its thighs of bronze, and its legs of iron, its feet partly of iron and partly of clay. This statue is messed up. When you look at those statues of Ramses, and when you look at those colossal statues, they are solid stone. They are timeless. The weapons of the ancient world would have had no power against them. Virtually nothing could have topped them. These things were monumental. But this statue is very strange. It's very unusual. The head is normal. The head is normal. And a lot of times in the ancient world, they would take the statue and overlay it with gold so that it'd be even more impressive. And in this case, only the head has the gold on it. And the next thing, it says the breast and the arms were of silver. So we're got a digression here. And then he says the next part of it, its belly and thighs of bronze, its legs of iron, and its feet of iron and clay. By the time we get to the bottom of this statue is in big trouble. You can't put a monumental statue together and put clay at the bottom of it. It's going to crumble, right? It's going to fall. It's going to collapse. So one of the things that we're seeing here is that all of this is leading to something. And then he says in verse 34, and this is probably the part that confused Nebuchadnezzar the most. He says, "You continue looking until a stone was cut without hands, and it struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and crushed them. And then the iron, the clay, and the bronze, and the silver, and the gold were crushed, and all at the same time it became like chaff from the summer threshing floors, and the wind carried them away, so that not a trace of them was found. But the stone that struck the statue became a great mountain and filled the whole earth." When I share with you now what all of this means, we begin to see that God is about to take charge of everything. It would look like Daniel and his buddies were stuck in Babylon, never to leave. But what we're about to see now is God is about to take charge of the entire world and of all of the entire course of history to follow. Nothing is going to be left to go in its own way. God is going to direct the next 500 years of history. So he says here in verse 36, "This was the dream, and now we shall tell you its interpretation before the king." Daniel not only knows the dream, he knows what it means. I would call this unprecedented knowledge. And with this knowledge becomes unprecedented insight for us and for them. He says, "You, O king, are the King of kings, to whom the God of heaven has given kingdom, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the sons of men dwell, the beasts of the field, the birds of the sky, he has given them in your hand, has caused you to rule over them. You are the head of gold." And Babylon was. Babylon was a terrifically powerful empire. They ruled huge amounts of the world. And not only that, they were unbelievably wealthy. The problem was that when they came and conquered your city, they forced you to worship their gods. We saw that in Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego, right? You're going to eat this food, you're going to teach these things, you're going to become Babylonian. They said, no, we're not. And because of that, what? They were thrown into a fiery furnace, but they wouldn't burn. And even though the Babylonians tried to conform these individuals to their system because God was with them, they failed. But the overall culture of Babylon was to force people to be Babylonian. And one of the things that happens next after the Babylonian kingdom is conquered by the Medes and Persians, verse 39, after you will arise another kingdom inferior to you, almost as powerful, then another third kingdom of bronze, which will rule over all the earth. This kingdom that comes after Babylonian, the Medes and Persians, there's an individual that rules this kingdom called Cyrus. And in the book of Isaiah, I wish I had time to reference all these verses for you, but in the book of Isaiah, God calls Cyrus my servant. My servant Cyrus. He's going to come and he is going to do some things very different than the Babylonians. Because the Babylonians came into the world and they conquered and they tried to eliminate all the gods. And there's a sense in which they eliminated much of the religious thought of the ancient world. And then when Cyrus came into and conquered Babylon, he had a policy of tolerance. He allowed the Jews to be Jews. And there's a sense in which by the time he comes along, they have already returned to the promised land. They have already started rebuilding Jerusalem. They have started to become themselves again. And Cyrus allows them to do that. Had it not been for this change of administration, the Jews would have never been Jews and Jesus would have never been born. It's an awesome working of God and his power through the kingdoms of the world, through what he would do. And then the third kingdom, the kingdom of bronze, was to rule over all the earth. There was this little kid. He was probably like 19, 20 years old. His name was Alexander. And he grew up in a battling society. It's very, very, very militaristic, lots of battles. And he grew up. And as he got to about the age of 19, 20, he was already a commander. And then as he began to take charge of the Greek armies, nothing could stop him. And as he would conquer one city, that army would then become his. And as he would conquer another city, then that army would become his. And as he would conquer another city, and over and over and over. And in a period of a very short amount of time, Alexander makes the world Greek. What's the language of the New Testament? Greek. In a short amount of time, this empire, this individual, and all that he does, and yeah, he's a conqueror and he's doing all these things, but at the time, the seeds are being laid for the gospel to be spread. The seeds are being laid. And then the final entity, verse 40, then there will be a fourth kingdom as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron crushes and shatters all things. And that was the Roman army and the Roman legions. Oh my goodness, did they do what they did. So like iron that breaks in pieces, it will crush and break all these into pieces. He's talking about all of these kingdoms that Rome would take charge of. And in that you saw feet and toes, partly of potter's clay and partly of iron. It will be a divided kingdom, but it will have with it the toughness of iron, inasmuch as you saw the iron mixed with common clay. And as the toes and the feet were partly of iron and partly of pottery, so some of the kingdom will be strong and part of it will be brittle. And in the net you saw the iron mixed with the common clay. They will combine with one another. And in the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, even as iron does not combine with pottery. The Roman army and the Roman civilization, I'm just going to give you my take on this, okay? All right? If I've ever studied a wicked and sinful culture, I would describe Rome in that way. And if you were to ask me what this clay represents, I would say it represents sin. And if you were to ask me what caused the fall of the Roman Empire, it destroyed, in a sense, itself. Because when you have people that are so wicked and they do things that are so evil, it doesn't stand. And if you study most of the Roman Caesars of the first century, you will find that most of them did not die a natural death. In fact, most of them were murdered by their own subjects because the things that they were trying to do were just unstandable. And as you look at where Rome went after that, the barbarity and the cruelty and all the things that they did, ultimately, it crushed them. The sin caused them not to be able to stand. And then as a result of that, we see what happens next in verse 44. And in the days of these kings, God of heaven will set up a kingdom which will never be destroyed, and that kingdom will not be left for another people. It will crush and put an end to all these kingdoms, but it will itself endure forever. This kingdom that he's talking about is the church. You know, when Constantine becomes Christian in whatever sense that he did in AD 300, when that happened, the church swept the entire Roman Empire, didn't it? All of these gods that had been part of the Roman Empire, because the Roman Empire became Christian, or the Roman emperor, now the rest of the empire had to also, at least in name. At least in name. But the result of all of this was a conquering of all of the gods and ideas of the world before. Literally, the cross conquered. And in this case, in this language, it's a stone that is pictured here. He says in verse 45, inasmuch as you saw the stone that was cut out of a mountain without hands, that it crushed the iron and the bronze and the clay, the silver and the gold, the great God has made known to the king what will take place in the future. So the dream is true, and its interpretation is trustworthy. Oh my goodness, is it trustworthy? Especially for us, as we look back over how this all transpired and put our finger on each part of this, we can see that it's exactly what happened. And if you were to ask me to describe these empires, I would describe them to you exactly as they are worded here. To me, this is their characteristic. This is their nature. This is what they were like. This is what they were. The biblical definition describes them so aptly. And what God is doing here is he is preparing to send his kingdom. Now, this language in verse 45, a stone cut out of the mountain without hands. Here we are back where we started, right? Except we're not building a statue anymore, are we? Earlier in the text, there's a statue, and Nebuchadnezzar sees it, and it terrifies him. Here, there's a stone that's cut out, but not with human hands. They had to cut these stones literally out of a mountain with hundreds of individuals with little pieces of metal, and it took forever. It took forever. They would wear out a chisel about every 4 hours. They'd have to go back and sharpen it because the chisels they had were nothing compared to the titanium strength we have today. If the ancient stonecutters could see the tools we have today, they would literally, jaws would fall off. Boom. How do you guys do that? But this stone is not quarried for any human purpose. It is not quarried for any human goal or desire. This stone is cut out by the Spirit of God. Literally, by the power of God. It is cut out without even hands. And in the ancient world, you had to have all these hands to cut out this stone. You had to have all of this stuff. This stone is cut out without that. What it means, the implication here, is that God is doing this. Remember all the people in our world and of their world that said, what is God doing? God is cutting out his kingdom. And he's getting ready to establish it, as I'm about to show you in a couple other texts. So as we turn now to Matthew 16, we get to see the result of this. What is that stone going to be? What is it going to do? How strong will it be? Because it says in Daniel chapter 2 that it will never go away. An eternal kingdom that will come. In Matthew 16:13, now when Jesus came into the district of Caesarea Philippi, he began asking his disciples, who do people say the Son of Man is? Who is Jesus? Who is he? Is he just some guy? Is he a prophet? Is he a priest? Is he a king? What is he? Who is he? And they said, some say John the Baptist, others Elijah, but still others Jeremiah or one of the prophets. What about Daniel? He's one of these maybe. And he said to them, but who do you say that I am? Because they know that he's not Elijah, and they know that he's not Daniel, and they know that he's not Jeremiah. They know he's more than that. And so they say, Simon Peter answered, "Thou art the Christ, Son of the living God." That word, Christ, I wish I could stop and talk to you about the weight of that word. It means Messiah. It's the literal Hebrew word here, and it means the anointed ruler of God. The very King of kings, Lord of lords, the King. You are the Christ. You are the Savior. You are the one that all of history has pointed to, back to Genesis. You're the Christ, Son of the living God. What an unbelievable understanding that Peter is displaying here. And Jesus answered, "Blessed are you, Simon, because flesh and blood did not reveal this to you." In other words, you didn't learn this by watching the news. You didn't learn this by reading the recent newspapers. You didn't learn this in school. You didn't learn this from your friends. You didn't learn this from your family. You learned this from my Father who is in heaven. That's where we learn who Jesus is. We're not going to learn it from TV. We are not going to learn it from a college. We are not going to learn it from anything that we might see when we leave here. Probably even our phones know nothing about this. But we learn it from our Heavenly Father. In verse 18, he says, "I tell you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I will build my church, and" what? "The gates of Hades shall not prevail against it." Is the church going to be here tomorrow? Yeah. I don't care what anybody says. You know, and we live in a world that says the church was a long time ago, the church is gone, the church is this, the church is that. They've got all their stories, and they're trying to stick to them as best they can, right? They're trying to say all these things about church. Church is old-fashioned, the church is out of date. They're trying to say all this. What we're learning here is the church is going to be here tomorrow. Now, the things that people are saying about the church, not so much. Not so much. But the church itself is going to be here tomorrow. To which I would ask the question then, should you be a part of that? If it is going to endure and it is going to be here tomorrow, ought you to be a part of that kingdom? Ought your family and friends to be a part of that which is going to be here tomorrow? There's nothing that anybody can say to change the nature of these things. There's nothing that anybody can write that can change the nature of these things. There is nothing that anybody can put on the internet that can change the nature of the fact that the gates of Hades will not prevail against it. CNN has little power over this. If hell itself cannot conquer Jesus' church, what power, I ask you, does anyone else possibly have to say anything about this? None. Absolutely none. And so what we're seeing here is that the church is going to be here tomorrow. And ultimately, we have a work then to do tomorrow. And what Peter is learning here, Jesus says, "Upon this rock." Peter, your name means rock. Means pebble, but it's still a type of a rock, right? Peter, on this rock, on you, we're going to build this kingdom. Are you and I part of this? Well, let's see. Look at 1 Peter 2, verses 4 and following. He says, "And coming to him as to a living stone, rejected by men, but choice and precious in the sight of God, you also as living stones are being built up as a spiritual house for a holy priesthood, to offer up spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ." Each one of us is part of that stone. What does that mean for us? That means that we cannot be conquered. As we'll see here in just a second, the stone's not going away. People are going to try to move it. People are going to try to uproot it. People are going to try to do a lot of things to this stone and to us, but they're going to have a hard time. They're going to have a very difficult time. He says, "For this," verse 6, "is contained in Scripture, behold, I lay in Zion a choice stone, a precious cornerstone, and he who believes in him shall not be disappointed. This precious value then is for you who believe. But for those who disbelieve, the stone which the builders rejected, this became the very cornerstone. I used to sing a song when I was a kid. The building block that was rejected. Anybody heard the song? Became a cornerstone of a whole new world. It was an awesome way to learn this verse here. Okay? The building block that was rejected became the cornerstone of a whole new world. It's true. It's true. The next verse, and a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. You know, so many people, they come up to the church and they say, well, I don't like the fact that I can't lie, so I'm going to lie anyway. And they kick against that stone. Well, what do? They hurt their foot. Okay? And then another person comes along and says, well, I really want to be mean to people. I really want that. So they come up and they hit that stone as hard as they can with their hand, and they hurt their hand. The stone doesn't move, and the rules cannot be changed. What about the people that says, I'm so angry and I want to spill that on everyone because I have a right for that and I want to do that. And they pour that out on the stone, and the stone pours it back. A stone of stumbling. A stone of stumbling. The world heaves this opposition at a stone, and the stone can take it. I'm reminded of a story of ancient Babylon before it was conquered. And a poor peasant was asking the general of the army, he says, this army is coming to conquer us, what do we do? He says, have the walls of Babylon ever been conquered? And the kid says, no. There you go. In this case, this stone, this wall cannot be conquered, and we are safe within it. And we are safe being it. We are safe being it. We are safe being these living stones, because no matter what comes at us, what we are made out of is unconquerable, unshakable, unchallengeable, and undefeatable. This is the cross of Jesus Christ. I will close one final thought. 1 Corinthians 1:23, Paul says, but we preach Christ crucified. I love those words. Preach. What is one of the most important things we do every week? We preach. And whether you're actually doing the preaching or you're supporting the person that does, either side of that coin is what changes the world. Either side of that coin is what changes the world. How did this church get here? They held a meeting, and preaching took place. And at the end of that meeting, a church was established. You can read the history for yourself. How are Christians established and made and converted today? There has to be preaching. There has to be. There has to be a teaching of the good news of Jesus Christ, and people have to hear it. Paul said, how can they hear unless somebody preaches to them? There has to be a preaching. And what Paul is saying here is that we preach Christ crucified. Okay, it's way easier to talk about how great Michael Jordan is as a basketball player, isn't it? When I was a kid, that's all we ever talked about. We were like, man, Michael Jordan could shoot it. He could jump from the three-point line and make it if he wanted to. We used to talk about the superhuman capabilities. We used to talk about the amazing things that he could do. But ultimately, what the church does is it preaches Christ crucified. And this is the difficulty. This is the difficulty. This is the hesitation that the world has, because we are talking about something that is very difficult for people to see. We're talking about Jesus dying on the cross. It's not a pretty picture to look at. No matter how we dress it up, it will never be attractive in that sense. And this is what Paul is saying here. We preach Jesus' death. That is what we are. And he says the next thing, to Jews, a stumbling block. And we talked about a stone of stumbling and a rock of offense. The Jews went up against the gospel, and they just stumbled and stumbled and stumbled. And he says here, to Gentiles, foolishness. Don't tell me about Jesus, they said. Don't tell me about somebody dying on a cross. Tell me about something else. And our world today seems to echo the same sentiment. But what does he say next? Verse 18, for the word of the cross is to those who are perishing foolishness, but to us who are being saved is the power of God. Don't expect the world to be too excited. But at the same time, what an unimaginable power and thing that God has done as he lays this stone in Zion that will endure no matter what comes against it. This morning, as we are part of this and as we see our mission and our purpose to carry this message of Jesus Christ crucified forward, what a glorious opportunity this is, and what a glorious mission. What a glorious opportunity to carry the salvation forward that does save us from our sins and help people recognize who their true Savior truly is. This morning, if we can pray with you and if we can help you and be of service to you in any way, we'd invite you to come as we stand and as we sing.